Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Madness Entertainment Group presents the Madness Comic Network with original programming and additional comic-related content.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 9th and 10th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
And here we are, creating beyond calculation, beyond politics, beyond the big two. Welcome, Silverliners, to the wonderful world of Wednesday Wham. I'm your host, Dean Zachary, and tonight we got a boys club, kids. We got a boys club, so we can go crazy tonight. There's no Barb. Yeah,
to rein us in, be the voice of reason.
Right, exactly.
You always said I look like a girl.
Well, tonight you're one of the guys, Aaron. Tonight
you get to take off the pink dress. Yes,
that's right. Tonight we have Rob Davis, the paragon of pencils. We've got our superior skeptic, Aaron Humphreys, both wizards of wordplay, I'm happy to say, Rory Boyle and Scott Wakefield, who, by the way, I have to say, we got to brag on our boy Scott a little bit. He was interviewed on a regional radio program up in Western
Buffalo.
New York.
Yep, in Buffalo.
Up in Buffalo. So he got to give him creds for doing a great job. Very inspirational. He comported himself well and didn't stumble down into the abyss and embarrass us all. And he gave us a great plug, man. You gave us a great plug. You talked about Silverline. He wasn't just self-serving. There was some company, creators mentioned, and so it was wonderful. It was
thank you to WBEN in Buffalo and David Bellavia for taking the time to have me on, because
No. Wait. Say it with your radio voice.
And thank you to WBEN Buffalo and David Bellavia for their time today, having me on the radio. It was great.
It was awesome, dude.
It was so cool.
You did great. We've got 2 listeners already here, watchers. Stream Elements says Silverline Comics is now live. Streaming talk shows and podcasts, supernatural sciences and comics. That's actually automated. But we have James Davis there. Isn't that great? We have James Davis saying, hello, everyone, and I love this
James
snake.
Davis.
That's not Snake Plissken. That's actually Kurt Russell in
McCready
The
from
Thing.
The
Thing.
Yes. Isn't that awesome?
Such a great
anyway, I know, right? Such a great movie. So that brings, speaking of science fiction movies, we're going to be talking tonight about what I like to call supernatural sciences, which, just to summarize for everyone, I know, I'll take too long, but I'll try to make it brief. What I do here is try to make the complex a little bit more understandable. Here we go. When you take science fiction, it can get really complicated. It can get really cold. It can get really in the weeds, so to speak. So what I love about good creative storytelling in comic books, because that's what we're doing here primarily, is what we're talking about, is we set the tone, we set a basic foundation, we set rules to the science, okay, if we're basing it in science. Rob Davis, one of the legends who got to work on Star Trek, one of the greatest science fiction franchises ever. One of the things I loved about Star Trek, we talked about this a little before we went on air, is that Trek was great about implying, overtly stating, and basically passing on by osmosis a set of rules for their science fiction world that you could easily absorb and roll with after a handful of episodes, and with a couple of conceits like the impossible transporter, but could be maybe one day, that would be awesome. And the fact that the main leading officers in the crew, yes, the captain and the first officer go on every away team, sure. But
and
you
the
set
chief
that aside.
medical officer.
And the chief medical officer. That's right. I'm a medical officer. I'm not a warrior, Jim. But the thing is, you absorbed all that and you got used to it. It became a friendly set of rules that you could depend on. And you felt, especially with some of the great science fiction writers that contributed to that show, from the original series through all the multiple incarnations, you got this idea that much of the science was based on real science. So, Rob, when you started working on Star Trek, right, or actually, what was your exposure to it other than just from the original series and watching it on TV? Did they hand you a Star Trek Bible, and did it have you can only show this or that?
I know Gene Roddenberry had a Bible. It's very well known that he has his Bible, but yeah.
Right. Did they pass that on to the creators who were working on the show?
When I was working on Deep Space Nine, I got I got the Bible on all the characters.
Awesome.
And they set them up they photographed all the actors in different. They would stand like this, and then they would do they did the whole bit. It wasn't very useful to me really, except as a general what they looked like, but no poses that I could swipe and use.
Right.
But and of course it was based in a world that had already been built with
the show,
the original series, and then Next Generation at that point. So a lot of it didn't have to reinvent the wheel. But the only weird thing that they threw in was the aliens that were inside the wormhole. And I just read an article on somebody speaking about that, and they never really got their heads wrapped around that properly, because they talked about how those aliens lived outside linear time.
Okay.
While that's a concept, that's a pretty good concept, but in order to make it work in episodic TV, where this week we're going to tell this story and this week we're going to tell another story, where it's in a linear world, how do you bring a nonlinear alien into that and make it work and make it sensible? You can't. So they did it pretty well in the first episode, but after that it got real wishy-washy and weird. So
Well, is it fair to say
Deep Space Nine is weird?
Is it fair to say that in Deep Space Nine and in Star Trek in general, that some of the time travel issues muddled the water, so to speak, and sort of got a little bit more fantasy and away from science fiction? It sort of strained the limits of believability.
Deep Space Nine too. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't want to get off your believability, but Deep Space Nine got into the spiritual stuff too a little. I know Star Trek does that a lot, but Deep Space Nine had that kind of weird.
Well, the Bajorans.
Cisco was.
Those, the aliens that were on the closest planet to Deep Space Nine itself, the space station. It was Bajor, and of course the people were called Bajorans. And they had a religion based on the aliens who lived inside the wormhole. Which made some sense. If it's a nonlinear being and they have interactions with them, they're going to be able to prophesy what's going to happen in the future and talk about what's happened in the past all at once, because they have supposedly lived throughout time. They understood all of time, and and I don't think we human beings could really get a full grasp of what that would be like, because we live linearly. So
correct.
It didn't quite work.
It didn't quite work, but what did work was the establishment of boundaries, right? Mm-hmm. With science fiction, is it fair to say that the boundaries in Star Trek worked for you? It kept the believability angle healthy.
And you're still talking to me about this. Okay.
Yeah. Just because you start us off with Star Trek. Yeah.
The original series, they actually contacted scientists associated with NASA and the manned space program, and talked to them about was this possible? They would throw something at them and they'd say no, but this is possible. And look, here's a here's a communicator.
Yeah,
I've got my cell phone in here, and it's about the size of a communicator.
It's more of a tricorder with what it can do now, though.
It's because it's got all these other things going on. But what kind of things could we extrapolate what is NASA working on today that might be completed by the 22nd century? So 23rd century, I think, is when it's actually based. But,
hey, look at our guys
reporting live from the streets.
I can't hear you.
Where are you?
Traffic.
Do these.
How's it going?
What are y'all talking about?
We're talking about supernatural sciences and the inclusion of science fiction and sorcery in comics, and when it works and when it doesn't, and how we can learn from that. It's really cool.
Science fiction, sorcery, and comics.
Yeah, pretty awesome.
This little thing called Cray.
Yeah, that's right. We're gonna bring it all around.
Get over here, Haley. I'm too sorry.
Get in there.
That's just me.
What are you guys up to? What's going on tonight? You guys out on a field trip, looks like. What's happening?
Yeah. Signing at Coliseum of Comics in Orlando. That's where you can find your Silverline comics.
Ooh, awesome.
They have a really cool rack with all the Silverline comics there.
Cool.
Very fantastic, cool. Man.
Y'all didn't know that we were having a Silverline meeting today? Y'all aren't here. What's the deal?
Wow. I love it when it just the surprise.
I didn't get awesome. My per diem.
All these we get mileage, right?
Where's my flight ticket?
That is
was going to fly corporate, but you didn't send the ticket.
When you send the jet rolling up, I'm on it. All right.
That's awesome, man. That looks like y'all are having a blast. So tell us.
There's the store. Can y'all see the store?
Yeah, I can see the store.
That's cool.
And
that is awesome.
Haley's going to drive home and try to join you.
Okay.
She makes it home.
Good. Looking forward to seeing her.
Looking forward to seeing
We need a female contingent.
Yeah, we don't have Barb tonight. So
we have no
represent
tonight.
You got to represent.
Such an ugly man.
I know, right? It's just it's a boys' club tonight. So somebody's got to keep us in line, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you guys misbehave when Barbara Haley's not there.
Yep.
I know, right? I know. It's
We
true.
misbehave no matter who's here.
Hey, that's one of the reasons college dorms wanted to go to co-ed, because the guys literally took better care of the dorms when there were girls around.
Oh, that's right.
Oh,
It's
was
true.
that the
It's
was
true.
that the excuse? Okay, okay. Pretty smart. Pretty smart. All right. All right. I'll buy
That makes
that.
sense if I held it further back. So that
That's good.
Oh
Yeah,
wow,
you get it
that's
all
great.
in now.
Yeah.
Wow, we get the whole
But
panoramic
now we
view.
can't hear.
Yeah, now I'm gonna go.
All right.
Bye.
Y'all have fun. Bye, y'all.
Hey,
Bye.
thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you. So, wow, the boss checks in unannounced to make sure we're doing
He's
what we're
always
supposed to do.
watching.
He's always, no, it's a
And then
big
he's
brother.
sending the girl
And it's
over to
sending-
take care,
Yeah.
I know,
to
right?
get
To
us back in
spot.
line.
I know, right? So let's get all the good stuff covered before they get here. But in terms of science fantasy, now I'm going to step over into a little different realm here. Is it fair to say that when we enter the realm of Star Wars, I'm just picking the most generally known franchise, obviously, to illustrate my point, that we get a little bit more into fantasy elements. We have magic, such as the Force, magic wielders, such as Jedi and Sith. We have dark and light. So again, we're getting a little bit more magical, a little bit more religious overtones into it. And yet we still have spaceships. But in this case, the spaceships fly around like fighter planes. So the physics of science are warped and altered more and more. And really, it's full-on space fantasy. So it's fair, I would think, to say we're talking Flash Gordon level at that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Exactly.
Don't forget about Q in Star Trek, because that was a weird.
Yeah, they never.
What was he?
Yeah,
and
he is.
Yeah, and he's in Picard now.
Yeah.
So we don't have to dwell on that, but there was that.
I understand.
Kind of like fantasy. He can do magic.
Well, in the original series, the Squire of Gothos.
Yep.
Was like that as well.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was there.
There's even speculation that he's actually part of the Q continuum, but that's they never did that in canon. So,
it's more of a. It's more central to Star Wars with the Force through everything. Because
exactly.
Star Trek had these characters, these odd guys that could do just about anything, and Star Wars, these Jedi, the Force, and all that sort of stuff.
Right. Harrenberg says, how about the Arthur C. Clarke principle? Did you mention that yet? We have not, but I'm so glad you brought that up. The Arthur C. Clarke principle is that advanced science in certain levels is indiscernible from magic to the primitive mind. Correct? So the idea is that to us, a supreme intelligence visiting from outer space would seem like they were performing magic. And it makes a lot of sense, because if we showed our cell phones to someone who grew up not exposed to that, they would think we had trapped someone in a little box, right? And they're
a young
talking
Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court.
King Arthur's Court, absolutely. So what was wonderful about Arthur C. Clarke as well is that he anchored his material so deeply in his scientific knowledge that he could write almost anything and believe. Asimov was this way as well. They anchored their material with such weight and gravitas, so to speak. Wow, I'm bringing in like Latin. That's getting too scary. So I'm gonna pull back a little bit. I want to go into real, academia here. But Aaron, talk to me about what sells it for you, whether it's science fiction, science fantasy, or sorcery and magic in a story. What sells it for you? What breaks it for you?
I think fantasy. I usually like more surreal fantasy. Never ending story, things of that nature. So sometimes that's more dream-like sequence stuff than any sort of basic laws. I do like systems. If they're gonna do magic, I do like systems. Like in some books it's like words evoke magic. Talismans for like Japanese magic. I do like a set system of, like, in other words, you can do kind of anything you want in Magic, but there's limitations to how it's performed. Like you have to set up the spell or do something specific in order to execute it. I think Magic is one of the things that needs limitation on it. Science to a degree. I pretty much like, if we're going to split the two, I like science fiction when it's a little more based around the possibility of science. You may not be able to completely explain how it's working. You know, like the idea of like somebody actually harnessing the energy of a black hole. That would be beyond our even skill to understand. But the idea that you could do that if you're advanced enough is reality. You know, even in Star Trek, they went to a Dyson sphere. Now, even to build a Dyson sphere would be beyond humanity's scope.
It starts with the vacuums, though, right?
It does. It does start with the vacuum. So there's
starts
like
with vacuum cleaner.
Spaceballs, the big one with the vacuum.
Foundational.
But yeah, it's one of those things. Like I think I usually like science if it's possible to do it. Then I'm okay with it. It's sometimes where it's like, you know, as dumb as it is when they have sound in space. Star Wars, I gave, you know, whatever. But when they put sound in space, and sometimes like, okay, that's just not possible because of the vacuum. So there's certain things, like even science fiction, where they kind of break it a little bit. I'm like, okay, some things like Star Wars, yeah, okay.
What about 2001, where Kubrick brilliantly used classical music to sort of turn the slow movement of actual spaceships into a ballet. It turned it into a ballet. It was beautiful.
Exactly. And I think, and not only, I think it was 2001, 2010, there were certain scenes. I think there's one where he's like going across the tether between stations, and it was completely silent. The silence is what created the tension.
Yes.
You can use the silence effectively. You don't always need music. And I think the other thing too is I do think if you do follow science, especially if you're doing interstellar travel, it makes the area more dangerous. If you cannot hear in space, that feels foreign to people because you're taking away one of their senses. It adds a heighten of danger to it. Well, God, this guy better not get out of a spacesuit. I mean, this, you know, if it, you know, you take away certain elements, it feels very foreign, and space is technically foreign.
Of course,
you know. Even though they did say, and this is from an astronaut, they actually say space smells like burnt steak. You can look that up. Some guy tested it on the space station. I'm not sure what he was using to record the smell, but they were trying to record, like, what does it smell like? And he said that's generally the smell you get from it, which take that. I don't know what.
Interesting.
You know,
it's all of our barbecues and our grills going off.
Just going off in the face, right?
It's the burnt insulation.
Yeah,
the burnt insulation inside the spaceship.
Yeah.
Elements like a Dyson sphere or harnessing a black hole fall under the Kardashev. Am I saying that correctly? Aaron Kardashev scale of galactic civilizations.
Have you guys heard of that? The scales of galactic.
Enlighten us.
What's even funnier is we're not even first level.
No, we're zero. We're zero. And so it's supposed to be the idea. Rob knows this. I guess the first civilization to be harnessing the whole entire planet. Is resources.
All the energy of a planet. Yeah.
All the energy, like basically harnessing the core or whatever. Stage 2 would be harnessing solar system.
And
then of course stage 3 would be harnessing things in the galaxy, actually like harnessing stars, hence the Dyson sphere or the black hole. If you get to stage 3, I mean, you're talking. I mean, it's so highly advanced.
It's godlike.
It's godlike. And that's and if we could find remnants of these, we could. I mean, would these people take any interest in us? No, that would be like you walking out of your way to take an interest in an anthill. They just wouldn't care. They just wouldn't care. With nothing to them. So I think science fiction, if done right, I don't mind a little bit of magic. I mean, every science fiction show I see always adds like, well, this is rare element this planet has. So this weird element. Look, as far as we know, the periodic table of elements covers all the elements. You can combine those, but to go into space,
there is no dilithium.
There's no rare. It's all the same. So that's when you start going like, you know, even when they were talking about the idea of doing the spice, that breaks up a little bit because there's no such thing as the spice. Maybe there's a combination of something, but then again, that's fine. But then I mean, they also have this sort of quasi magic, even though it's harnessing of abilities.
They do. Dune falls a little closer on the spectrum to
realistic
Star Wars.
A
little bit, because again, you have specially skilled individuals with self-discipline tapping into an invisible force that allows them to do superior things.
Right.
So again, you got a little bit of that going on, which is very Jedi-like, and you know, you got expansion of consciousness, and you got folding space with guild navigators and all that. So there's enough Flash Gordon fantasy in there.
I think when you get a high enough technology in any science fiction, you're going to unfortunately bleed or push into a little bit of the magic, because just to even sit there and explain the details of how that would work is beyond our scope.
Right.
What kind of machine would you even comprehend that could harness a black hole, even though that's something that Type 3 civilization can do? You couldn't even. So there's a little bit of like, okay, even Star Trek. I mean, you had the lithium crystals. Okay, that, you know, that's made up. That's fantasy. But you know, it works a little bit. I always took the lithium crystals as maybe some sort of rare combination of material that they will combine to form these. I don't know. I can't remember.
Except they mined it.
They mined it. Okay,
they'd find a planet that would, you know, it's got
this
enough dilithium crystal for the next.
And I'm not sure. And the funny thing is, I never could quite figure out why they went. I mean, he was always pretty hardcore science fiction to do something so just out of the blue, like, well, instead of just saying, well, no, we found some way to harness
something
a black
on
hole.
Earth. Yeah, we have
like, why go? It seemed weird. It seemed like kind of well, how do we explain how the ship goes? Well, just whatever. So
that's what they focused. The power created from antimatter and matter colliding. Is focused through those crystals. Supposedly.
Yeah, but it seems. Yeah, but I get what Aaron's saying. It seems like we could have taken like something we had in the 1960s and then extrapolated it out.
Right.
Like if you just a nuclear reactor now it's this big.
If you would, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, in the 22nd, 23rd century, our nuclear reactor can do that. Which really, because it radiates, it's radiation. I mean, it kills Spock. Spoiler, sorry everybody.
It works the same way. I mean,
hang on.
Hey, on a side note, those Fathom events, things that the movie theaters do, they're releasing Wrath of Khan, I think in October. In the theaters.
I saw that.
So go look online. Check. I'm going to definitely go see it because I saw motion picture in the theater. It was really cool. 40th anniversary. Now Wrath of Khan's going to be 40th anniversary. Going to take my kids.
Cool. How cool is that going to be?
Right. Yeah, and Wrath of Khan is one of my absolute favorites. That one's so good.
Yeah,
better
a lot
on
of fun.
Big screen.
Oh man,
it really is.
That's space battle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wrath of Khan is so awesome, and I love old school sci-fi too because it's in the models. You know, they're blowing up models, and they're like, when you go so old school that the special effects are really bad, then you're like, you can be like, but like Star Trek in the 80s, hey, that was starting to get good, and it was good, and Wrath of Khan is so good, and they made that tension with the battle going on in the nebula there,
in the Mutara Nebula. It was a submarine battle. Basically.
Exactly, it was so
very
good.
Cool.
I love that. Cool. That movie is one of my favorites. But yeah, Aaron, I'm sorry, Dean, you can cut me off if you need to. You're talking about how they set up rules in their world. And for me, I get annoyed when they break their own rules. So in the Star Wars world, it just seems like they just keep breaking their rules. Star Trek, I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, stuck to their rules pretty well. You know, when the inertial dampers are down, every episode, that's what they can't do a thing. They can't move the ship. They can't that sort of thing. Okay, when they got to eject the core because whatever. I felt like Star Wars when you add that element of the Force that's not quite definable.
Yeah,
you can just kind of do what you want with it. And then in the fantasy world, I know we're kind of on the sci-fi fantasy, but in the fantasy world, like, hey, Tommy, when you start breaking the rules, even of your fantasy worlds, even if it's magic, I feel like it just gets you have
even
to
if they try to explain it.
Right, you have to explain it. Like, okay, Gandalf got more powerful. Okay,
right.
But you can't just suddenly like, oh well, now he can do that. Like, X-Men, Magneto. I feel like moving the Golden Gate Bridge
was a little
a little much. You
set your world, you set your rules. You stick to them. And
basically, it's a combination of consistency with rules that are established early in a series.
Yep.
Verisimilitude. Tone. Let's keep the tone of the series fairly consistent. I mean, you can do comedies, tragedies, thrillers, murder mysteries, whatever you want, but there's a tone to Star Trek that stays pretty consistent throughout the franchise.
Iron Man 3, I felt jumped the shark. And then I even felt through the MCU series, the movies, Iron Man's armor got to the point where it's like, what can
it's
it?
magic.
It's
nanotech.
That's when they started doing nanotech, I was like, okay, if that guy was actually able to build that, the world would have looked completely different than what it was. It would have changed reality.
James Bond, the last Pierce Brosnan, Die Another Day.
Die Another Day. It was way because we're talking technology. So they had holodecks. He had an invisible car. Okay, it's James Bond, but he was always on the cutting edge.
Cheesy out the wazoo.
Way over.
So stupid. It made me angry because it was like, this is like Star Trek technology, and MI6 has it. And
so broke the believability and the tone, and the verisimilitude is thrown out the window.
Yeah. We can take him getting shot at by 100 machine guns and not get hit.
but no invisible cars, please.
No.
They do that even in even in the Marvel universe. They have like cloaking technology. Like they cloak the stuff, and then I like how they're using modern military jets. But then you look at the jump jets and these super high tech. And you're just like, okay, and look, if you have to, either the world reflects the technology you're using, or because I mean, like we look at any government. There's a government out there that's like light years of modern technology in the modern day, and so it's one of these things. I wish they would reflect it a little bit. But they just like no, all the superheroes have this crazy stuff. I mean, and the funny thing is the nanotechnology stuff. They use nanotechnology to, I think they almost break it. Like they're always using it to like build, to build mass. Like they'll just add mass to something. It's like, where's this guy getting this mass? It's like, we'll just make it. It's like, no. It would take. I mean, if he was building a huge hand cannon on his arm like Iron Man, it would take the mass off his legs.
It'd have to be the whole. Where is it coming from? Where's the
they just do this stuff.
Just because he makes a big thruster doesn't mean he can have all the propulsion to.
Well, now we're also getting into Ant-Man and Giant Man.
Wow. Okay.
Where does the mass? Where does the mass go?
I always wondered that too.
And where does the mass come from when he gets huge?
Yeah,
and not to mention the fact, like,
again,
the force of that Bucky's arm. I'm sorry, that's a whole conversation. Bucky were to punch with the force of his arm, he would fly backwards. He would fly up, but he would have to have mass enough to stop the force. Anyways, all right.
Well, even the same thing as
thank you,
a Giant Man. If Giant Man was actually to grow as big as he did, his body would literally just collapse under its own weight. He would just turn into a pile of broken bones or whatever. It's just too massive for it, unless he's finding some way to restructure the bones.
Good point. I wanted to bring up that Herrenberg says transporters are an even bigger conceptual issue. Copies of things, a person or Earl Grey hot is not the original. In that future, an original item would be almost priceless, although there's no money. That's correct. And he says, like an original non-transported bottle of vintage Picard wine. How cool is that?
Did you ever? I mean, I know because the matter things had to have limitations. Because even when he's talking about, I mean, if you're gonna say you can just make anything out of anything,
why not build spaceships?
You build spaceships. But there's obviously, I took them almost like 3D printers. What they're printing from, if they're using energy or something, I'm not sure. I never heard that it was. I think they are extracting it from something to build
Enterprise
something
technical
else.
manual said they do reuse their waste.
Okay.
Oh,
so maybe that's it. Maybe they're breaking down other matter, and then that's an interesting idea.
It's breaking down matter to its smallest constituent parts and refashioning it together. But when you do that,
that's a lot of energy, though.
You have but you also have a lot of leftover. If you what you're creating may not have everything in it, so there'll be. And it may be radiation. It could be something toxic. It
will only be diminishing returns.
Yeah,
which is why they talk about replicator food not being as good as the real stuff, right?
You know what's funny? I did see there is this is a real. Somebody actually made a 3D printer that could print food, and they showed it. But it was, I mean, the food was printed from a sort of food matter type thing, and I don't know if it was heated or whatever. And I mean, if they just, especially when you have 3D printers, that they're just saying, like you said, either reusing matter or they have to stock up on this sort of, you know, gel or something to make this stuff, like when they turn, that would be interesting because it would give a limit. It would, story-wise, it'd be interesting. Like, we need to replicate this. We don't have enough to do that, or how would we get? I mean, you could add that into the story.
The future, Voyager should have dealt with that. Voyager should have dealt with that, and really didn't.
Yeah, they just had people just keep using the bathroom. It's part of their duty. Pun unintended.
So, I got a Star Trek question for you because I've always been, and maybe you guys have read the manual. So in the holodeck, because I'm a Next Generation fan.
Okay.
How were they able to continuously walk without bumping into the wall?
And how
the only thing I can think of is a movable floor.
Somebody. Yeah, but how do you get away? It does say it has a movable floor, but how do you get away from your friend? Like, if you're standing next to somebody,
because you'd only be able to go like 10 feet and then you hit walls. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
you know, the funny thing is, I could almost see when they're writing Star Trek, there was limitations. I mean, I would see if they did that now, that they would just literally find a way to jack into a virtual reality environment, and I think that would be more plausible. And then it would just because that's technically what they're doing is creating a virtual reality environment, and they would just do something like the Matrix. They could just jack in, and that would be completely believable.
You have an avatar, which is more believable. Lower Decks does joke a lot about like things like the holodeck and all the stupid stuff that no one thinks about on spaceships, on Star Trek spaceships. But
I mean, I like the idea of the holodeck. I mean, you know, I've been watching, that was Discovery. Is that the newest one?
Yeah.
And Discovery,
which one of the newer ones?
Yeah. The problem with that, and I don't know why they continuously do this, as we've talked many times before. Like, this is supposed to take place before the original Star Trek, and technology is like light years ahead of it. So it's just like
just make it look antiquated.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, they have holograms in this one, but they lose that technology in the original, and then they slowly gain it back.
But they explain it, which I think is hilarious. They explain it for later. They say it creates some sort of problem, like because Captain Pike with the Enterprise says we're going to scrub the computer of, you know, we're not going to use these, which is so funny because, like, then why even use it? Why not just stick with your original series? But it does have to be kind of retconned. But I think they do it okay. They understand it. Like, you have to say, okay, since 1960,
definitely wink, nudge.
I don't see why they just didn't make it a completely, either in the future or just like a completely new Star Trek, where like they would explain. I don't know. That's the problem with the show. If we could do more visual effects to make it look snazzier, but then how do you explain that within the context of the show? When they should just be like, no, this is going to be kind of like maybe a soft reboot, or maybe like this stuff was explained later. I just don't know why I know they don't want to do it in the future, because then, you know, things have made peace, and then they got to talk about all the wars or whatever.
Yeah, it gets to be a little more academic and theoretical politically, I think, if you go too far in the future. So they wanted some primitive action, so to speak. The thing about it, though, is, Aaron, I've heard rumors that there's supposedly some cataclysmic event that brings everybody back down to a more primitive level, and they have to kind of start from scratch.
So between Discovery and Captain Pike and Kirk, there's going to be
something.
They lose touch screens and have to go to switches.
Yeah. Well, they did that in
the throttle cable between the bridge and the
Dune. They did that because I remember hearing in Dune, it was like an artificial intelligence, and so they had to go. They had to go back in technology in order to survive. But then again, the problem with that, if there is a cataclysm, then you're like, well, then why didn't the original Kirk ever mention that? Like, you think they would have mentioned it at one time in the show?
That's why I think Rob's explanation is better. It's just an alternate timeline, alternate universe.
That's the best way you can do.
That's the best you can do with it.
Right.
See, but for me, when they do that sort of stuff, these alternate universe things, again, like the multiverse we talked about before, I feel like it cheapens it, because then I don't care.
Yeah.
Because
but it's fun.
We're gonna hit. we're going there.
Don't care.
This is not the Enterprise I was in love with.
Yeah,
this is not the crew. This is not the Pike.
That's not the Enterprise.
That's gonna, Well, yeah. Also, Pike wheeling around in a chair that goes.
Right.
Well, aren't they doing a new series with Pike?
They are. I've been told here by Herrenberg says The Expanse is by far the best applied hard sci-fi ever filmed. Mm-hmm. Definitely expound on that when you get to it. Okay, so who has seen The Expanse, and anyone want to expound?
Sorry.
I've seen a little bit of it, and it just wasn't my thing.
Tim TK loves it.
Yeah. Okay.
Our Tuesday night show host, he loves the show.
The Expanse, I think.
Okay.
So, strangely enough, a lot of science fiction television gets kind of boring to me, and not with the portrayal. Like they get it just. I don't know. They always like I've been watching Raised by Wolves. And I'm like, okay, this is Ridley Scott, and of course all the androids bleed white, like just like an alien, so it's the alien android.
Sure.
But it's like, eventually as you're going through, it's like one of the androids gets pregnant. I'm like, who didn't see that coming? Because it's kind of like logical stuff. It's like they're always and I think that's my, and of course the whole series is just them on this planet and like running around, getting into trouble, doing stuff, and I think science fiction to me has always worked better in short format.
Short form?
Yeah.
Because then it just becomes it just becomes either a sitcom or a drama.
Exactly.
With weird outfits.
Yeah.
Because they do the same stuff. It's
a period piece.
We fall in love. We have a baby. But we do it on an exotic planet.
I mean, I would love it if they mixed fantasy in that and had like this quest that put the idea of a quest into like so they're setting off the like destroy the ring and Lord of the Rings. What if they did that in a space drama? What was these crew on a ship going out on this quest to find it, which they kind of did
Babylon
that in Battlestar Galactica.
And Babylon, Galactica, Babylon 5. Herrenberg
which gave them an overall arc of where to go instead of just kind of wandering around talking science babble, whatever.
I hear you. He says, for example, they use rail guns, which work on momentum, not lasers or blasters.
Yeah.
That's a good point, too. I like when weapons are based more on hard physics rather than theoretical or things that we can feel, you can see, and they move and, that sort of thing. He also says...
I'd be kind of curious to hear they use rail guns in The Expanse, like hand rail guns?
Yes.
Or are they talking about rail guns because you have rail guns now, but they're usually a few miles long.
Yeah.
So,
like if you're using rifles that are rail guns now, they've shrunk them down.
Yeah, because the only thing I can think of how to do is that you would just basically, if it's a mass driver, my idea was that, and I don't know if this is how they're actually doing it, Rory. They're just basically would be spinning the mass in a cylinder, and then as it picks up enough speed, they just release it into the actual barrel to be ejected. The mass drivers on the
I think they still have a projectile.
The Atom Smashers are mass drivers. Yeah. But you need that room for it to pick up speed, so you'd have to have something. And I could I could see that working, but I could not see it being a rapid fire because you would have to have it pick up speed unless you're firing it while the other one is spinning. I mean, at least with ballistic, it's instant explosion. But
so we see a new Gatling gun. We're good.
Yep.
So, is it possible to make a
spaceship? Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
a sci-fi movie with real physics. Because would it just become boring? Would reality just be like? Would it be like NASA International Space Station?
Because it would always break.
Yeah, you're right.
It would always
be much more dangerous. Yeah.
Well, they've done realistic NASA adventures. That are documentary style of actual adventure.
Gravity.
Right.
If you got to like Star Trek level again, that has to become theoretical because
it has to become theoretical. Right.
That Raised by Wolves is more mystical and theological. I'm still, which is weird because I'm trying to figure out in that show, is it use railguns as weapons on spaceship?
Weapons on spaceships,
logical.
That's what.
Where does one watch Raised by Wolves?
HBO Max.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on
it's
HBO.
HBO Max series.
So here's the thing here. When you're talking about how realistic you want to go, you're always faced with that problem. And I think someone with the comprehensive knowledge of science, like an Arthur C. Clarke or an Asimov, when you're adapting something like 2001, I think Kubrick had a great grasp of what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the novel and we're going to show it as realistic as possible and really lull you into a sense of structured realism that this is so possible, so that when we go through the vortex, wormhole, mystical transformation of the main character, and start having those fantastical visions at the end by the time we reach the Star Child, you're ready for that because you've been hypnotized. I used to call it one of the best hypnotizing films you'll ever see because you're lulled into this sense of realism. Kubrick does a tremendous job with this, so that by the time we get into all the fantastical elements, you're in. You're in with the main character. Wow, he's going through some sort of transformation. He is expanding his consciousness. He's becoming one with an alien intelligence, and boom, he's a Star Child. Okay, cool, I get it. Sort of. But that's what was so nice about it, right? It had ambiguity to it. It had fantasy elements to it, but it grounded you and brought you in with a journey.
Right.
So
and I think there's
kudos for that.
That, and I think science fiction sometimes suffers a little bit from more tell than show. A little bit. And I think Kubrick did a good job of showing it and not telling what's happening.
It's a little too much. Some science fiction's too preachy.
Yeah.
And it's too expository too.
Yeah.
We don't need to know why all these things are working. I mean, because you just don't need to. The conceit there is we've reached this stage of technology. We can do this. Like, for example, Alien, the first film. It has a gritty realism to it. Yeah, okay, it's got DOS computers, blah, blah, whatever.
Which you could actually almost see working. Because, I mean, the funny thing is, not to interrupt you really quick, but
go ahead.
You look at DOS and you're like, well, yeah, it's DOS, but I'm thinking, but if this is a cheap-ass mining company, they might just give them the base computer, do whatever, right?
Your mechanic who has a computer with carbon paper.
So I just saw that as like, this is a company paying the most minimal for these guys to get their job
and this
done.
was an expendable crew. I mean, they were just miners, and they were used in essence to bring a specimen back for the company. So the storyline was just a brilliant way to work around the budget. It's like, gosh, we can't really do the high budget stuff. And then I thought they really advanced it quite well with Aliens, where it stepped up. We moved into the future a little bit, and we saw a little bit more of the alien life cycle. That was cool.
Right. And he, even in the technology, they put, like, Cameron's always been really good at putting realistic technology to a degree. Like, all the pulse rifles actually use caseless ammunition, which by that time, and it's caseless ammunition now. But it was like a standard. That's why you're like, how does it hold so many rounds? Like, well, and if you watch the film, they're not ejecting brass. Because they don't need to. So
they don't need to,
little things like that. And again, he's not explaining it like you said. He's just like, no, this is what they would have gone to by now.
Yes.
When somebody gets in a car in a movie and turns the key, they don't say, I'm starting at the combustion engine. The spark plugs are going to ignite the fuel. And
if it's diesel, they might say
the car
wait
move
for the
forward.
plugs to glow.
We gotta wait for the glow plugs. We're in Minnesota.
That's diesel. That's diesel.
That's why they did a really good job with the Minority Report. A lot of the technology. And Spielberg worked and researched a lot of like the six sticks was actually a concept developed because they were trying to figure out non-lethal ways of putting somebody down. Like police and six sticks were an idea of causing involuntary vomiting or spasms. Other things on there, it was interesting, but the magnetic car rail thing, they said we can do that now.
Yeah, the maglev stuff.
Yeah, they said because that's futuristic. No, we could do it now, but no one's going to pay for that. The gas companies won't let that happen.
Right?
But it's like that technology is feasible even now.
Sure, of course.
So, which I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. So it was kind of cool when he looked at what's feasible now and said, well, we can kind of combine this world like that. And I think when Spielberg and Cameron have done good jobs in their. Christopher Nolan has actually done a good job of some of his ones of showing like technology. It's like it's starting to change a little bit here and there. They even did that kind of well in the movie, the Wolverine, the Logan movie, when you actually had like the automated trucks on the freeway. Yeah, the one like you had like trucks driving themselves in the freeway. Where you could tell like, okay, this is a little bit in the future, but we're still within maybe 25 years.
Right.
What it is. So I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. There's a little bit of like science fiction stuff, but just enough to say not too far, but things have changed a bit. And I thought that was really, and they never explained that I think they explained like the trucks are automated or driving, but they just kind of showed them. And there's a few other things they did in that one. I'm like, okay, that to me, like you said, but not explaining it, just saying, look, it's really just, kind of there.
Right.
Just to add this realism.
Yeah. I like that. It's really a shame they never filmed 2061, 3000. Yeah. We never get to see the Europens, how we are. Yeah, it is a shame. The other Arthur C. Clarke I always thought would make a great high-budget film was Childhood's End. Have you guys ever read that? It's a brilliant book.
Now, I thought nobody liked 2010. I know it wasn't Kubrick.
No, I liked it.
Directed.
I liked it fine.
Yeah,
it's fine.
I am a huge fan of 2001. It is my favorite film.
Is it?
Really? Is it? Wow.
My friend had his favorite film too, Nathan.
Yeah. It is my favorite film.
And there's some shows that even tried to do. I mean, strangely enough, there was one that was half fantasy, half realism. That was the original Black Hole by Disney. If you watch that, there was they would actually show weightlessness, and they would kind of go into some of the ideas. This would be like in space, and then they have lasers and stuff like and like big. So and so
and the goofy robots and
they were on the assumption black holes would take you through time and space. Of course, we know obviously but there was at the very end, I still ambiguous. I mean, the main character ends up in Maximilian in like a version of hell, and it's never explained.
Right.
Did he go to hell, or is he on another planet? But I think it's kind of interesting. But that whole show, and apparently that show was made in response to Star Wars.
I think Disney wanted at that point something competitive because Star Wars and Star Trek were doing very well in the late 70s, and they needed something to throw in there. And it's considered, a pretty solid Disney sci-fi movie.
You have to take into effect that there's a lot of science they didn't know. I mean,
of course,
more things. Yeah. I mean, that was the same thing when I watched the John Carter show. I mean, it's like, okay, this is mostly fantasy, but it's like, but back then, he was written what, 1912 or something like that. The original John Carter.
Good question. Yeah. John Carter. When was John Carter written?
1917. It was right around.
So early 20th century.
Very early.
They thought the moon was still cheese. So
right. And so I mean, so the fact that he can jump higher on Mars is like, that you just realize that's taken into the knowledge they knew at the time, and that's totally fine.
They did make a Childhood's End TV miniseries in Australia in 20. Yeah, I did see it. The Clark book series has never been filmed as Rendezvous with Rama. He's correct.
When did we actually get something onto Mercury? Because didn't we think for the longest time that it was like a lush
Mercury? Well, Mercury doesn't rotate on its axis, so there's always a face facing the sun, which is almost like
it rotates, but it rotates at the same speed that it goes around.
Right,
it does. Okay, because one side is always facing the sun and one side is facing away. So one side is literally frozen, and one side is literally boiling, lead, I think, or
just like the moon is over the Earth.
Right.
Yeah,
it's just funny to think like in the grand scheme of our knowledge. It was very recent that we actually learned what Mercury was actually like. We thought it was this lush jungle planet or something that it was clouds in a greenhouse and all this. And
are you talking about Venus or Mercury?
Venus? I'm sorry. Venus.
You're talking about Venus.
Venus.
Venus. Russia did
toxic
send the
atmosphere.
probe.
That one's like
you can find photos. There was a probe that did land on Venus. That was Russia. and it lasted 5 minutes before it was, I think, fried.
Dissolved.
There's a picture
Dissolved.
of the ground. There's a snapshot of the ground of Venus.
Yeah.
You can find. That's the only thing it sent back. Then it was just destroyed.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
it tried. Yeah.
Is that the probe that they also the lens cap came off for the camera because it was supposed to like a diamond lens camera, and it was supposed to try to scoop up. I remember hearing one of the probes. It was trying to scoop up a sample, but the lens cap landed and it just hit the lens cap and couldn't scoop any
That
soil.
might have been it. I'm
Law.
not sure.
Yeah.
But I know it didn't last, and this was done. Oh God, 80s or so. It's a while ago, and there's been,
Actually 70s, I think, but somewhere in there.
We want to go back to Venus. They're planning something to actually go into the atmosphere of Venus, and this is something they're looking into. I don't know if it's going to land. But they want to do atmosphere.
Because they think any life forms that might be at Venus would have to be alive in the atmosphere.
In the atmosphere, that's what they're testing and looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it was covered, they thought it was covered in clouds. Well, that's why you got the name Venus. It was most beautiful, so they thought it was actual paradise.
Yeah,
and then of course later after they named it Venus, they found out like no, this is like the most hellish planet in the solar system underneath the clouds.
Which makes it a perfect name, right? Venus, right? Goddess of love, and then you find out, run away.
Because I think she was married to the god of war, so that kind of
My astronomy teacher, my astronomy teacher explained in college explained the moon's 1-to-1 rotation to revolution ratio, and he said that's perfect if you're ever in a knife fight because you want to be turning at the same rate you're rotating.
Okay, nice.
We're playing knife fight. The perfect knife fight
and
rotation.
He's obviously talking from experience, right?
The professor's seen some shit. Yeah.
And you expect him to start telling the story. So when I was a kid,
it stuck with me.
I grew up in a tough neighborhood, guys. So we were in the street one day, so I was in the knife fight.
Think of the moon, 1-to-1 rotation.
Like we're looking at the moon, I would have been dead. I would have been dead on the ground. If it wasn't for the moon, understanding the moon, it would have been over with.
Inspiration.
I survived because of the
man
moon.
in the moon.
Yeah, right. It's just
Thank
crazy.
you, Mr. Cheese.
All of his moon tattoos. Look at that.
Venera. Okay, so but I've only heard that only one reached the surface. Now maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe multiple did, but I've looked this up and I've seen one actual photograph of the surface. So maybe that's others probes and stuff.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Which in itself to do that the math, the brains that figure that stuff
to
out.
Calculate that.
I'd be like, it's right there. Shoot it right there.
Go
Ready,
for it, man.
And go.
You just got to shoot it straight in. The one I'm waiting for is I know they're planning, and I still think they're planning to do one to Europa, which is I think it's a moon.
Oh yeah, moon of Jupiter, right?
Yeah. Which I think is kind of covered in an ocean. Yeah.
It's gonna be fantastic.
One of the other moons.
Yeah, Europa's a big one. I think there's another one too. That to me, I'm always just like, I hope I'm alive to hear if they find anything. Because these missions take a long time to get going, right?
Yeah.
So because sometimes I'm old enough that I'm reading missions like they're planning. I'm like, I won't be alive tonight.
No, not to flex or anything. But I got a box full of
2050, we should be.
By 2070, we should.
I'm gonna be dead. Yeah. So
it's over unless they find a way to clone and transfer consciousness. Who knows? I don't know.
We'll be heads in jars, Futurama
right?
Style.
We'll be heads in jars
with President Nixon.
I think my favorite is they put the Beastie Boys on there. That was my favorite.
Isn't that great? Isn't that fantastic? Boy. Okay, so now comes the time where we want to get into the pop culture stuff, as we haven't already. The entire pop culture thing. But I wanted to talk specifically about in the Marvel universe, the cinematic films, and then we'll do the DC universe as well. What has worked and what hasn't worked, blending magic and science. Go, Aaron. What do you think? Let's start with Marvel. What hasn't worked for you besides the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe? But I mean, can't be that general. But to pick a film like, for example, have you seen Spider-Man? Never Go Home, Far From Home, Never Gonna Make It Home. I don't ever know if I'm ever going to see Home Again, Jiggity Jig. I don't know what it's called.
Most of the stuff in the Marvel universe just never really work. I consider it just complete fantasy.
Okay.
You know,
All right. Fair enough with that.
Yeah. You know, if they were going to, I would say Zack Snyder is also fantasy too. Superheroes, they get to the point where they're just, you know, a superhero universe remind me of the guy who's like, I'm going to do a comic book about the pirates and ninjas, and they're fighting, you know, anthropomorphic Ninja Turtles, and you know, it's just like everything in the
everything.
It's like even in the Marvel universe, it's like, well, how realistic is this? Like, well, they had Doctor Strange who knows magic. Now there's vampires because Blade hunts them, and then there's mutants, and then there's mutant monsters, and I'm just like, okay, they just it's once you start doing that, then
it's fantasy, dude.
Pure fantasy.
Yeah, it's fantasy. So I think in a way you have advantages that way because okay, we've let magic in here, so in a way it degrades a little bit of the believability of the Iron Man suit, especially as Scott invoked with Iron Man 3. You're like, what, nanites do everything now? Come on. So you know, again, it's a little bit much, but again, it opens the door. You can do anything. Now let's jump over to DC. I think the closest thing we've gotten to science fiction that really is solid with superhero movies is probably Nolan Dark Knight, I guess.
He tried.
Because everything he does is doable. It's with money and resources doable.
Even though it was an alien, he that was probably one of the more science fiction type of stories immediately.
Yes.
The Man of Steel.
Yes.
Where it was like you have this alien technology and they meet Earth, and Earth is not, you know. I'm like, okay, that's, even though it was, you know, converting the planet, and that's kind of science fantasy, how that technology works, that tended to stray a little more towards like a science fiction show. And he even said that he wanted the Man of Steel to be like a sort of alien encounter sci-fi show, which I think worked perfectly.
I did too.
And I really like that whole take on that. You know, later on, but then again, then it's like, yeah, but by the way, there's a whole island of Amazons hanging out there too. I'm like, okay, now we're going back in the fantasy. So, you know, I love Zack Snyder's stuff, but again, the DC universe is almost even worse than the Marvel about mixing stuff, because you can have like Amazons, then you have Kryptonians, and then you have like people running on the capes in Gotham. Only Gotham, they don't spread out to the rest of the world. There's a whole team. Gotham apparently is the worst city in the world.
Worst city in the world.
You know. And you would think, after how many years he's been doing it, how many bat people they have, like 10 or 12, you think he would have made a dent by now in the crime? Like it would have been somewhat safer. But apparently it's just no, it's all the criminals.
It's a hellscape is what it is. It's a hellscape.
My theory is that Metropolis just deports all their criminals to Gotham secretly.
Yeah,
and just be like, here, you
Gotham,
can have them.
Dude.
There's a Batman dying there.
Right. What about you, Scott? Talk to
probably
us,
the most realistic.
I would say yes. What about you, Scott? What about Marvel versus DC? Success and failure with establishing a science fiction that you feel was consistent, believable, and had a gravitas to it. And then the same with the fantasy question.
My DC knowledge really is limited in the the movie world, because I could only commit so much brain power. And full disclosure, after Endgame, I've really had a struggle having a desire to care. I'm looking forward to Armor Wars because Iron Man's my guy, and I love the technology. But then, like I said, Iron Man 3 is like even his faceplate has pulsars and like flies. The gloves. So then by Endgame, or by Infinity and Endgame, his suit could do everything, and I was like, then he's okay. He can be killed. I mean, Superman can be killed. Iron Man can, but it's like I don't worry about him anymore. It's too much. So I thought, in the grand scheme of they explained the magic of the Asgardians, as Earthlings, how we understand them. I like that. I like and I think the comic books did that later, right? Because Thor was what's his name with the cane, right?
Donald Blake.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So that was like a different little magic thing there. But yeah, they integrated that idea of we have this myth. They're magical. They're just powers from another planet, kind of Superman style. So I thought that was done pretty well technology-wise, and I've said this a million times. They don't explain Iron Man. It's just Tony Stark. He's a super genius. He can do it. That's what he does.
So that it was the tone, and then consistency, which was pretty well kept from Iron Man 1 and 2.
And then and then I just felt like it just got out of control.
Spiraled out.
But yeah, and like Aaron said, too, all the tech that Tony creates and that S.H.I.E.L.D. creates, and it's like it's just
if you don't reach a limit, there's no drama.
Right.
Good call, Rory. Good call, man.
Yeah, you don't care anymore. You don't like.
Yeah.
Okay, and now Spider-Man has an Iron Man suit. I always wondered that too. How come just give everybody a freaking Iron Man suit?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I know.
I understand he gives that up at the end of the latest movie. So
did you see the latest one, Scott?
The latest.
Did you see? Nobody's home. Can't get home ever.
Yeah.
Spider-Man Home Alone.
Nobody home alone.
Spider-Man, I can't ever get home ever in the world. I'm stuck out here. It's never going to happen. What about you, Rory? I haven't heard from you tonight. I want to give you the platform here. Successes, failures, good science fiction, bad science fiction, good fantasy, bad fantasy. What does that mean to you, and how do we avoid doing the bad versions?
I think to avoid the bad versions, you can't explain too much, because if you explain it too much and you drill down into it, magic becomes science. So then
it takes the magic away.
Right? You
take away all the mystery out of life.
It becomes science fiction. I think not explaining the traditional sense of magic is that things happen, and we know that they happen. We don't know how they happen, and that's what magic is. And then, like in a fantasy setting, you have low magic, high magic. You know, you can do amazing things. You could do just like bare minimal things. I think that's a fun distinction. Like, I was talking to some friends about starting a D&D game, just low magic. Like
low magic is so much more. Why is that so much more fun? Right? Because
you have to think more.
There's risk.
You have to adapt to a situation. Yep, risk is huge.
Yes,
which drives drama, right? And I don't like when, let's say, it's a love-hate when Star Wars, the whole midichlorian thing. Gosh, that's a tangent we could go on for another hour.
It's just,
and then all the novels that came out of that. And they got super scientific about it. It's like, it just killed the magic, didn't it?
Yeah, you just killed the magic.
But then the magic went to, and I haven't seen probably the last 2 Star Wars movies, but from what I've understood, everything they go like the Force can do everything.
You're not missing anything.
Right. Yeah. And then
if it's everything, then it's nothing.
Yeah. And because then you ask, well, why the crap did he do that back? Like, if he could have done that, what?
Why didn't he?
Right. Yeah. Why didn't he do it?
Hey,
then?
Luke, just grow a new hand.
Right. Just grow.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah.
So, wow. Okay. Cool.
Well, that's a classic example of like the sci-fi world breaking their own rules.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
But they made them gods, and I always liked it when the Jedi were powerful but had very strict limits.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I would say
it's not moral limits, physical.
Yeah. There was a few things even in the prequels that were written by Lucas that they did. Like I was a little fuzzy on the super speed at the very beginning when they're fighting the droids. They'll use it in one scene. It's right when they come across the ship in the Phantom Menace, and then they go like, "We need to move," and they ran really fast.
Oh yeah,
And I never figured out why they never used that again.
Right.
That was
that's super beneficial all the time.
Yeah,
because,
and I was a little fuzzy. I'm like, well, if like they can move that fast, so when they're fighting, then obviously if they could do that, then their lightsaber swings would be just like almost.
It's because
it's
their force meter bar went.
Or something. So there was a few things even in those that he did where I'm like, okay, that like if they can move at superhuman speeds, even for bursts, then they would use that in some sort of like moving their arms, swinging a lightsaber, and they never did that again. So I'm like, okay,
right.
The jumping and levitating, that was fine. That was in the fact that they can use. I just assumed they're using telekinesis as some ability to boost themselves or throw themselves. If they did the hallway set instead of super speed and did it like they could like jump down the hall, like they're jumping, that would have worked for me. But they showed a blur, like they were moving fast. And so there was one other thing he did in it that kind of, I was like, well, that's weird. He never did that again. The midichlorian thing is weird. Now my understanding from the movie, and I've talked to people about this, is they always said midichlorian creates the Force. I never got that. I remember,
I think
that's not what he said. He said the midichlorian just, the more you have, it's this parasite that communicates with the Force, and the more you have, the more you can harness the Force. Which I was like, okay, it's a cliche. Yeah, it's a cliched account, to be able to say like this kid's powerful. I took it as that. But a lot of people said no. They said the midichlorian makes the Force. I'm like, no. I listened to that. I went back and listened to that scene very carefully, and he never said that.
No.
No. So it still
right.
kept the Force. It's still mystical. It's just the midichlorians are able to communicate more with the Force, and I'm like, okay, I can see that in a weird way. I mean, Yoda's race is
alive?
more. Well, yeah, the Yoda's race is more Force sensitive than other races, so I can see like this parasitic alien is more Force sensitive than anything, and I'm like, okay, that kind of worked in line, but people just took like, no, he said the whole thing makes the Force. I'm like, I never got that. That's not
Aaron,
what I got from that scene.
Have you read any of the Timothy Zahn novels that were written right after? Okay,
did he expand more on that?
No, but what he did was he expanded on the fact that different races and different species had different reactions to the Force, and they're actually salamander-like creatures in those novels that repel the Force, that non-Force users can use against Force users, which I thought was very clever. So it wasn't always about can you use it or not use it. It was like, can you repel it? Which was also kind of cool too.
I read this Dark Horse comic that was about the creation of the Jedi. I got a library, and the story is so. Again, the Star Wars is very much a lot of the stories are they're not my. I'm not a big fan. The hero type story is okay. I mean, but there's a lot of cool ideas. One idea I did like, that I wish they would have expanded on more in the universe. And I don't know if it's from Lucas. Is that only Jedis can use lightsabers because they're using the Force to bend the light back into the blade. And I'm like, that is a cool idea. So it was only like because they were talking non-Jedi, non-Force users couldn't get the lightsaber to work. Like, well, no, it's a Jedi weapon. Only Jedis are able to do that. We use the Force to make the lightsaber.
Interesting.
Because the encyclopedia has a Force-activated lightsaber.
Mm-hmm.
And like that, I was like sitting there going like, that is a really cool idea. But then they just never did it because like anybody was. I mean, like Han Solo in Empire Strikes Back used it to cut the tauntaun. So it was, but I really liked the idea that it was a Jedi weapon only because Jedis could use the Force to make it work. Like that is really cool. I like that.
Interesting.
Well, go ahead.
There's book there. Believe it or not, because you like this type of academic. There are guidebooks, right? And there's one for the Sith, right, where they go into a lot of the lore. They go into equipment. They go into, the legends. It's very interesting. I think you get a kick out of both the Jedi one and the Sith one.
Yeah, that'd be kind of. Yeah, I never knew those existed.
They lay out the rules, and they're done almost like a notebook. So there's notes from characters in the series explaining why they can do certain things and why others can't. Cool. And the science of the Kyber of the Kyber crystals and things like that. So it's fascinating because again, you have a world that has a great foundation, and we've kind of absorbed it with all the entertainment that's been created. And if you stay within a reasonable realm of believability, you can write some really cool stories in that world. So that's
I would like to throw in my final point. The world, the universe of H.P. Lovecraft, I think is a beautiful balance of science fiction and magic you can't understand, comprehend. And, because
excellent.
But I love it that he actually, because they do add magic into reading a lot of Lovecraft stories. There is magic, but what I love about it, and I think what you're going at is it's not so much magic; it's just science we don't understand. So like that, it looks like magic. I'm like, that is a cool idea, especially when he uses a lot of geometry type stuff for the magic. Like there's like geometric angles and numbers and certain things that can break time and space. So like, Lovecraft stuff, brilliant. And I think Lovecraft was supposedly canceled because Lovecraft was apparently problematic. I'm like, really, somebody has not the same views as some the 21st. He's 1920s dude. You got it. I really like those. The other magic to add to that, the other world that I really liked that I thought did a good job with magic was Hyperborea or Conan's world because it was very subtle. It was very subtle. Lord of the Rings did this to a degree, but Conan was also very, very subtle. And it was very Lovecraftian in a lot of ways because he would find things that were almost Lovecraftian. Well, him and Lovecraft knew each other, so they were throwing ideas back and forth.
And Conan went Atlantean, which is a whole other
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, he did.
Unknown. It's a whole
That's
other
a cool
unknown
realm. Yeah, because Atlantis, especially, they explore that a little bit with the new
Mm-hmm.
Aquaman movie. You know, it's like it's science fantasy, and you get the idea. Well, were the Atlanteans just super intelligent aliens that first came to the Earth eons ago and established their realm underwater because most of the Earth was covered in water, and that was why not?
And the funny thing is, I always got like when I read the Aquaman books that it was supposed to be, and I think they changed it here and there. That was the Atlanteans were a race above land, and then they were cursed to go under the ocean or something, because they never do explain how they're able to breathe with no gills, and their bodies are not really made to swim. But I mean, it's comic book, it's fantasy. So
it's comic book fantasy, and it does borrow a little bit from Arthurian, because the fairies in that realm that created Excalibur and a lot of the weaponry were submariners. They were underwater beings. So they even, if you've ever watched Excalibur,
it explains the Lady of the Lake.
Yeah, explains the Lady of the Lake. It also explains how one of the reasons Lancelot was so undefeatable, not just that he was such a good fighter, but also you look at his armor, it's got fins on it. The implication was that he got his armor from the Fae, or the fairy folk. So,
the one thing I really liked how he did in the director's cut of Justice League is how he did the Atlanteans. I really liked the idea that he parted the water so they can talk. I thought that was cool.
Yes,
and the water, they would click. They would click, 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 and I'm like, that's cool. And then they did the Aquaman move, and they're all talking. I'm like, okay, that's dumb again. the movie, but that idea, it's like you had it, that sort of clicking on the water, like whale songs. That was the only, and then. Yeah, and then the Aquaman movie. Like, oh, I'm talking. Did you ever? Somebody actually did a trailer when they first did a trailer. The original Aquaman. Somebody actually, for fun, just did a trailer of like what it should sound like, and everyone on the water was like. It was hilarious. And you might be able to still find it. I'm like, yeah, that's what would happen. But I did like that idea that it was almost like they were cursed because they couldn't talk in the water. They'd have to spread the water to talk in air. And then when the water was back, they would use a clicking sound. I'm like, okay, that's a really cool idea. I like that.
Yeah,
I think I think Snyder had a little more thought out in Atlanta and how it would work. Like, how would this work? Than the other stuff.
Has everyone seen
work underwater?
Have you seen it yet, Scott? The 4-hour epic Justice League. It's an investment of time, but as Rory's saying, it's really good.
Oh, Rory liked it.
Yeah. Well, that's for some people that sends it right over over the edge. Rob, who's your favorite? Who's your favorite sorcerer in comic books? Go.
Not Merlin.
Ooh,
that's tough.
You must choose. You must choose wisely.
Early Doctor Strange.
Nice. Good choice. Good choice.
While Steve Ditko was still doing him, because I think his followed certain rules and followed them fairly closely. But once he left, then and other creators got a hold of it, and they started doing other weird. I stopped reading it after that. But I think the early Doctor Strange stuff really, and the imagery that Steve Ditko used made it very otherworldly and feel like we're opening into another dimension or opening into another existence. And that's how the magic worked.
Yes, Ditko did a wonderful job with just the worlds, and the first Doctor Strange movie touched on the Ditko influence quite well. I thought.
Some parts of it really felt like Ditko work. So
I
was in the movie theater going, "All right,
right. This is cool. The dark dimension. This is awesome. Yeah, it's Ditko.
I'm trying to think of other weird Doctor Fate. Was it Dr. Fate? He's
Dr. Fate's DC, but that's my favorite is Dr. Doom. I think.
Okay,
he's a good tragic figure.
Yes,
he's a sorcerer and a scientist, almost of equal level to Reed and the level of brilliance, in the Marvel U. And he's got that tragic man in the iron mask kind of story where he's a villain, but he's one of those villains that's written in some ways in a sympathetic fashion. To me, more so than Magneto is. I can understand Victor's motivations better than Magneto. Magneto, I'm just like, well, you escaped a Nazi death camp to become a Nazi? What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?
They make
Come
him
on.
way more powerful than he is. And they keep making him more powerful.
It's just kind of dumb. But I'll always like Dr. Doom because Victor's just ruthless. He's a ruthless warlord. And that's what he is. He's like Vader, but you get the idea that there's still some humanity left. There's still some good in you somewhere deep down, right? Somewhere, and that,
there were
all that
episodes where there were stories, especially when Kirby was still essentially plotting them, where someone came along and tried, right in the middle of one of Dr. Doom's, he's trying to get rid of the Fantastic Four, and somebody comes along and tries to interfere or to kill them himself, and he goes, "Oh no, I'm saving that for me. You're done." And he gets rid of the other guy, and the Fantastic Four get away. So there was. It's all. Dr. Doom is all about it's me. So,
he's the ego character, and the id combined, just no limitations whatsoever, and yet, unlike some of the other villains, you get the sense that he could still be reformed somehow, almost. You know what I mean? Like there's a little bit. You could save this guy, but not right now. He's not in that play. Very Anakin Skywalker-esque.
I always really Wizards. When I draw Wizards, I really like Nolan from Battle Chasers.
Oh,
comic.
All right.
He's based a lot on manga, which I think he's primarily based on Ninja Scroll. He was really influenced by then. But I like Nolan because he was like this grumpy old wizard sort of guy. And
it's
there
a
was
classic.
something about it. Yeah,
I
the
know,
classic
right?
one. He's just, was kind of like irritable and stuff. Yeah, I don't know.
It's like around, like everyone else is so like inferior to him that he's like, you're wasting my time.
Yeah, he's just wasting my time or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
by
funny.
the way,
I like it. That was one they don't, and that's still a question. I still can't quite figure out why they don't do more straight up fantasy comics and like D&D type fantasy type comics. It's very rare, and I had some other guys watching online who was asking that same question. It's like, people who play role playing games like comics. Why aren't there more D&D type style comics? They just
I'll be honest with you. The right talent and the right stories haven't matched up, but once they do, that will work. The closest thing was Sojourn with CrossGen. They did a pretty solid story.
Yeah, that was good.
Bone actually converged on the idea of D&D, even though it was cartoon. There was still a lot of sort of wizards and stuff in that story.
There's fantasy elements involved.
Fantasy elements, right? I wanted to say, Aaron, just so you know, it's on the schedule. April 20th, Wednesday Wham. We're going to discuss anime. So I want everybody just give you a little tease here for April 20th. We're going to talk about anime. We're going to talk about the influence of anime on American comics and American animation. We're also going to talk about, we're going to use the most well-known and the most classic. I don't want to get so far in the weeds that we alienate the non-anime people. So we're going to be talking about things like, Rob, things like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Ninja Scroll.
Not much.
If you guys want to do homework, Akira is on. If you guys have Hulu, Akira's on the free stream.
Okay.
I would suggest, even though if you don't like Akira is one of the only manga that really crosses between American and manga. It is probably the less manga of all the manga anime movies that have come out because he based it heavily on American culture. That's why, in fact, Akira bombed in Japan, got popular in America, and then got popular in Japan. Because the Japanese people, Americans like it. There's got to be something to this because he based it all on.
I've got a question though, Aaron. Is Godzilla technically anime?
I would say, it's funny. I would say that started in movies. There's animes of it, but that's more of a movie property. But there are animes of it. That I would just say, and Ghost in the Shell, I don't know if that's in streaming. But Akira, I think
probably
if
is now.
Even if you're not into anime, it is still just a solid science fiction show. It is probably, like I said, the least anime. It was done in the 80s, so it's not going to have a lot of goofy anime stuff that you see today. It's not
right.
And Akira,
and
I think
Ghost in the Shell has several seasons.
Yeah.
Ghost in the Shell, I would just go for the original feature,
the original movie. Yeah,
the original movie.
Yeah.
I thought it would be interesting to compare and contrast the originals and then some of the American attempts to replicate them live action, like Ghost in the Shell.
Mm-hmm.
I thought Ghost in the Shell actually did an okay job. I mean, it had its problems, but I think it did okay.
Aaron, have you watched homework for you? Blood, the Last Vampire.
I saw the original. I didn't know there was a live action, so I have to hunt that down.
I don't know if it's available. I looked it up to see if it was. I don't know if you can stream it on anything. You might be able to on Hulu or one of the
YouTube.
YouTube
I could find.
Maybe YouTube has it. But the anime was really creepy and cool.
The anime was great.
Yeah, buddies and I would watch that at Halloween. We're like, dude, we got to watch like Halloween. We got to watch this. Oh yeah, and Blood the Last Vampire, because it was this cool idea. Listen to this, Rob. Blood the Last Vampire is about a vampire hunting schoolgirl with a mysterious past. It's really it's like Buffy a little bit, but it takes place on an American air base in Japan right after the Vietnam War. Wow. Or right before. It's right around there.
It's actually really well done.
It's very well done. Very well done.
You know, I personally like Neon Genesis Evangelion. That's one of my favorites. That was actually done in 92, 93.
Which one is this? I'm sorry. Say
Neon
again.
Genesis Evangelion. You seen it, Rory?
Yeah. Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Yeah. That's one of my favorites. That you can find on Netflix.
Giant robot, giant aliens.
But it just goes off the rails. You just keep at
Netflix,
it.
No.
Yeah, it's on Netflix right now.
Okay.
Is the final one on there?
Yeah. Okay. So the way it goes is I know this is so stupid. So the original series, which I would recommend, the original series is on Netflix. They redid it in 4 movies. They've redone 4 movies on Amazon.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And the new series is okay. I got to watch it again. I think he nailed it the first time, and I saw the new movies, and I'm like, that's better anime. I don't know. You can't strike gold twice. You can't. Lightning doesn't strike. It kind of fell. I think it's because again, it's like I'm not. He kind of tied the 2 series together, but I don't know. I just like the original one. You can just have to watch the original series and then watch something called The End of Evangelion, which is a movie he made.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole thing, and I think you would really like it, Dean. If anybody, I suggest it to Dean, because if you like highbrow sort of philosophical ideas, Genesis is right up your alley.
Yeah, awesome. I'm all about it, dude.
Into that. Yeah,
there's some very Eastern themes in there.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Eastern.
Okay, so Neon Genesis Evangelion, everybody, Ghost in the Shell, Akira. Yeah. Those are the core. There's things that those are the big ones. I mean, there's some peripheral ones like Blood the Last Vampire.
Little bit. I did watch Dragon Balls. I know a little bit about Naruto. I watched the beginning of Naruto. That's one of the bigger ones. Anime now. I do know enough about the Dragon Ball Z and enough to talk about it, but I'm not an expert at any way. I do like Dragon Ball Z. I love that guy's artwork. I think his name is Toriyama. So those are kind of my big ones, and I'm kind of all over. I usually like old anime. That's kind of like a lot of the newer anime is okay, but I usually tend to stray towards all the old ones I grew up with. Apparently, my friend found this website where this lady says a bunch of those OVAs, the old 90s and ones on VHS, you can actually find on YouTube.
Nice.
I didn't know that.
Nice.
So, going through.
Well, guys, check that out. And we've come to the end of the broadcast tonight. And as we like to close out every week, we like to say,
Make mine Silverline.
Make mine Silverline.
Hey, I'm Alex Saviuk, and I just want to let you know, make mine Silverline.